My name is Steve Barrera, just a regular cat with an extraordinary God. Yeah, from the very beginning, as far as I can remember, there was an incident where a family was hanging out at the Sacramento River, and I got in the water and the current took me. And then I don't remember much else after that. I just remember holding my mom and whispering into her ears like, Jesus saved me, you know. And then I remember shortly thereafter, we were in church, man, and kind of grew up there and spent a lot of time in church. Sunday morning, Sunday school, Sunday service. My dad played drums in the worship team. I remember seeing my mom lead worship at times. And then we'd go home for lunch, and then we'd come back for night service. And it feels like we were there every day of the week. You know, we had a church family, so on and so forth. And then things took a turn there too, you know. A leader in the church was abusing my sisters, my siblings. It turned into a battle between the church leadership and our family being accused of certain things, went to court and all that fun stuff. And we left church, and I was probably about 11, 12 years old at that point, growing up in Oak Park. You might as well be an adult at 11 and 12 years old, you know? That's kind of when I first picked up my first drink or first joint. I remember times where I was drunk or, you know, in some type of state of mind because of a drug or alcohol, and I remember something would trigger a song that I sang when I was younger at church, and I would feel, you know, my buzz or my high like leave like the snap of the fingers, and I would get mad at God, like I'm just trying to drown everything and get away from it, and still I would hear his voice like, no, you're mine, you know, you can do what you want to do, but you're mine, and just reminding you. The moment I got reconnected with church, I was driving around, I was cruising one night. It was a 76 Caprice Glass House, man, beautiful car. Cruising down Broadway, and I remember looking around and seeing people in their cars with someone in there, and they were laughing, and I'm driving by myself. And I remember thinking, like, I'm just tired of being alone. And so I remember thinking, man, I had a really close-knit, tight church family or whatever, you know. So I just drove back to the church. I drove back to the church that I used to go to when I was a kid, where all the hurt happened and all that stuff. I was this, you know, goth kid, if you will, you know, with the guy liner and the black fingernails and all that stuff like that, and tattoos. It was crazy because everyone had this like look like, oh shoot. And I sat in the back, and I just, you know, crossed my arms and listened to the preaching and listened to them singing. And I remember my heart was completely open to God, but looking around and seeing people like looking at me like, I remember people like pulling their kids away from me, like, don't get next to him, you know. I've always kind of struggled with where I fit in, how I belong in certain circles and crowds. Church was, in my mind, something that was used to mask, you know, what was really inside. And I had cousins that were, for lack of better words, prim and proper, and like I mentioned, I was the goth kid with long hair and black fingernails, and I would get teased by aunts and uncles and say, oh, it's so pretty, you know, and I had another daughter and stuff like that, and I was like, wait, what? And it was always like this struggle for me to feel good enough, to feel accepted. I was eager to serve, and I got into ministry, and for the last 17, 18 years, I jumped in, and I was a worship leader, I was a small group leader, a youth pastor, an associates pastor, and then most recently I served at a pretty decent sized church in town as their creative arts pastor full time. My ex-wife at the time had she had an affair, and it kind of like pushed me down this place where it was like, okay, so for real, I'm not good enough, you know? But had to paint this picture of Pastor Steve, and I had to be happy. I had to be the guy that encouraged everyone on a Sunday morning, you know? And I lived for years broken, completely broken, hiding behind a mask, hiding behind a smile, and people would ask at church, like, hey, how are you doing? I was like, I'm good, I'm great, you know, everything's amazing. All the while living in fear of potentially losing my job if I gave into how I felt, if I gave into the hurt, the feelings of rejection, the feelings of not being good enough, The time I did open up to a pastor, it was just pretty much like, hey man, it's okay, suck it up. It happens to a lot of us type of thing. And I got to a place where I was just ridiculously depressed. And I found myself in a place where I was suicidal, and I confided in another individual. It's another woman from my church. Before you know it, we were talking about all the things that we hated in our marriages and so on and so forth. Little by little, we found ourselves attached, and we ended up both leaving our spouses and getting entangled in a full-blown affair while I was still at the church. It wasn't the easiest thing to hide. Then I was asked to leave the church, and so I left the church, and then I was completely broken at that point, because at that point I had walked away from my family. I had walked away from a life that I had built, and then I was told to leave. And I openly chose to walk away from God. I used pressure. It was too much pressure to be the good guy. It was too much pressure to be the happy guy. Too much pressure to be Pastor Steve, and I used that as an excuse to walk away and do what I wanted to do. And I lived just probably one of the worst years of my life, if you will. And even in that, God was still there, and He would always send someone. It happened like I said, it happened at a bar. It happened at the gym. It would happen at the grocery store. It happened at a gas station. I had this random dude tell me, like, dude, my family was done with church, and we sat through a worship set, and I was leading. He then told me, my family's never left that church, bro. We've been going to church ever since, and we stayed there because of your gifts, because of what God has in your life. And I remember thinking, man, if he only knew who I am. But either way, like, God used the Steve that He made. Even after all that, after all those years, and after all the things that He did to prove to me He was real, I still doubted. And I remember being on my face, literally on my face, with puddles of tears, and telling God, like, if you're real, I need you to take my life. If not, I'm going to. And I found myself where I was like, okay, it's it. I'm done. About a summer ago, someone tell me, this is a new church, you got to try it. It's called Converge. I think you'll fit in there. And then I heard in another separate conversation with a different person say, hey, have you tried Converge? And I was like, okay, this is too much of a coincidence, And then I talked with a friend that was connected to Converge and gave me phone numbers of these two dudes. I don't even know who they are. Sat and I met with Ed, and my goodness, the hope that came out of his story for me was like, wait, what? Even after running and even after doing everything that I did to try to escape who I believed I was, there's hope. And so I go and I walk in this movie theater, and I'm like, sweet, where's the popcorn? And I start worshiping, and I hear an audible voice like, welcome home. And I'm like, looked around, like, who said that? I said, God, well, my daughter Janice loves the church that we've been going to, and I had been struggling with it, but I was there for my daughter. I said, you'd have to confirm it through her. And so I take her the next week, and we sit through the service, and I ask her, what did you think? And she says, Dad, it feels like home. It was the first time I walked into a church or been in a church where I feel like I don't have to hide. I can sing at the top of my lungs. I can jump if I want. I can smile and it's real, or I can frown and it be real. I can show all my tattoos. I can wear skulls on my t-shirt. It was God telling me, like, look, bro, you've been trying this whole time to fit into something, but I didn't ask you to fit in. All I asked was for you to surrender. And for the first time in my life, after 17 plus years of ministry, I'm like, okay, God, I completely surrender. And now I get to watch. I get to watch what he's doing with my life. And it's cool because since I've been at Converge, like these few months, I feel like I know God more now than ever. I feel like I'm closer to him more. I've watched him answer prayers from the smallest tiny things, like, wait, what? You can do that? And it's so cool. It's so cool because God created me this way. And I'm still trying to figure out a lot of things, but there's no pressure to, you know? It's like as the story unfolds, I get to watch what God's doing through me. And I don't have to pretend that I'm doing work through God. Looking back, the heartbreak of trying to fit in or feeling like I wasn't good enough by my ex-wife who cheated on me, or trying to fit into this role of Pastor Steve because it was what was expected of me. I understand that those feelings, that hurt, that trauma was all because I was trying to be who I thought I should be. But now it's a clear understanding that it's not about who I am, but it's who he is. What I would say to anyone out there that's dealing with similar issues of identity, or even feeling like the weight of your sin is too much and you don't belong in a church, I guess the simplest way I can put it is just don't give up on God. Challenge him to meet you where you're at. The Bible says that there's nowhere you can go, you know, that is too far from him. There's nothing you can do to get him to love you more, and nothing you can do to get him to love you less. Here at Converge, like, I felt like I can belong before I behaved. I felt like I can belong before I believed. And I feel like if you're here today, it's because he wants you to know there's absolutely nothing you can do that'll push you too far from him, that he won't go and get you. My name's Steve Barrera. I'm a father. I'm a school teacher. I'm a car enthusiast. I'm a tattoo collector. I'm a musician. I'm a worship leader. But I'm just an ordinary dude with an extraordinary God.